Hi, Mandy. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
My pleasure. I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. It's brilliant to speak to you. We've been messaging
Thank
back and forth, so it's great to get the chance to meet you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for rescheduling. I babysat my granddaughter yesterday at short notice. I appreciate that.
Oh, no worries at all. Well, what is life like for you in California at the moment?
Well, very wet today, actually. We're having a really big storm, which is kind of unusual for this time in October. Well, it's unusual for us to get much rain anyway, but so we're hanging tight because I'm in an area that was affected by the recent fires in Altadena. So some people are being evacuated, but not over where I am. So I'm doing well at the moment, but I'm here with my two dogs, two cats, and two miniature donkeys.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm an old horse woman. That's what I love to do. What I've been doing my whole life is riding, training, and teaching people to ride. And I got involved with equine therapy, where they tend to use smaller equines and miniature donkeys. So they haven't actually worked; they're sort of pets, but it is what it is.
Well, let's go right back to the start then. What is your earliest memory?
My very earliest memory was actually of Tara House, where we moved with Keith. I don't remember. I remember my mum's parents. We lived with them for a while, but then Tara is really the first place I remember living. It was a very unusual house. My mum used to say it looked like an upside down egg carton because it had all kinds of shapes and angles, and it was a big white house and had, I think, about 10 acres of land. So I used to love playing in that garden, and it was a very unusual house with a sunken living room. And I had my own room, which was really big, and I actually have really good memories of Tara. But that is one of the first places I remember living and being.
I hope you don't mind me asking this, but you said there, Keith. Is there a reason you don't call him Dad?
I think because we left when I was so young, I was 9. We did leave from Tara House, and because of my mom got together with my stepdad Ian McLagan, who we call Mac, relatively quickly. They hadn't been friends for a long time, but he became my stepdad rather quickly, and so I think just from being used to having a stepdad, maybe out of respect for him, maybe not growing up being around Keith that much. I do refer to him as my dad as well. So I kind of, I don't know. I've never really called anyone dad because with Mac being my stepdad, I didn't call him dad either. So Father's Day was always a little awkward. Yeah, I don't know. It just is what it is. When I talk about him, I notice that I kind of go back and forth. I'll sometimes say my dad or my father sometimes. But yeah, I don't remember actually ever sort of saying dad to anyone, to be very honest.
Yeah, well, that's
So
fair enough. Yeah, yeah. Did he feel like a father figure when he was at home or not?
no, I'm afraid I don't think he was home enough for that to ever be kind of ingrained, or like we didn't sort of spend really any one-on-one time that I can remember. It was always with mom. When he drank a lot, things became quite violent and loud. So I was fearful sometimes. I think that puts a bit of a wedge in there. But the photo opportunities when photographers came over, and those kind of days when they were as going to be a magazine spread or something, and we'd all get dressed up. I actually have great memories of those because we were all three together. We were doing things. We were sort of enjoying ourselves at the house or out in the garden or whatever they wanted us to do. And the pictures you see with the cars and things like that. And I still really love cars, to be honest. I never came from him. I've never had any fancy ones like when I was growing up, but I just really like cars. But yeah. So there were some good memories. Those sort of good memories. But I can't remember, like I can't ever recall any time of sort of just sitting down or sort of cuddling with him or anything like that. That I don't know if it happened or if I'm just too young to remember, was too young to remember then. But that, yeah, that's sort of how it was. And having, like I said, having a stepdad fairly early on.
Yeah. So with Keith and your mother Kim, who was a model, both famous people. Um, when did you know you had famous parents?
I think it's more the way you're treated by people around you outside of the household, because everyone in the household knows who everybody is and are sort of all treated relatively much the same. But sort of going to school, I got treated differently, not so much by the students because we were sort of young at the time; they wouldn't really have known who the who was, but it was more the teachers and the my friends' parents who treated me differently and asked me lots of questions, and I didn't really understand why until and I think it was really there were a couple of teachers that stand out that were quite starstruck. One French teacher in particular, named Mr. English, which is funny, but anyway, but he was very starstruck. I mean, wanted autographs and just like took me aside and I really liked French and I really liked him, and he took us on this amazing field trip to Dieppe and went on the ferry, and so I really remembered him as a teacher, but I also remembered him as being this huge fan, and I think that really it could have made me realize, and I was quite a bit older then. I was probably I think we may have made, I don't know if we were already with Matt, but around 9 or 10. So
Really? Yeah.
I don't think before then I didn't go to school as much as a lot of kids, as a lot of I should have. It was hard for my parents to get up early. Um, so I really did have kind of a spotty education, I'm afraid. It was what it was back then. It wasn't seem as important. I was a different kind of mom. I made my kids, well, I was fairly lenient, but not as lenient as my parents about going to school.
You know, like when you're younger, like say teachers are a fan of your dad and wanting autographs and stuff, would you be a bit careful who you'd let your guard down to and things? Were you cautious of people?
Probably yes, yeah, definitely when I got older, and that's something I told my kids too, and because of them being they're 27 and 24, so there's a few generations in between. The fandom had died down, but when I was younger, yeah, and I know I would resemble him if he were almost 60, but I resembled him quite a bit when I was younger, with a thicker eyebrows and just the way I looked and I did get asked because my last name was Moon, because I didn't take my stepdad's name. I just kept Moon because it was easier to spell, to be honest. But yeah, so I was sort of quiet about it, and I'm still kind of quiet about it. I'll bring it up if we're talking about music, or if I think the person might be interested or like the fact that that my dad was Keith, and I'll tell them. But it's not something that I've been always been a very private person. And I think maybe it's because of some people's reactions have scared me a little bit over the years. So the very overzealous fans, and I've never been like stalked or anything like that, but I think because of being a kind of my mom was definitely very afraid of fans. She'd had some bad experiences with groupies being aggressive, literally. I mean, not physically, but like threatening her and saying scary things and writing letters, and I think she kind of ingrained, unfortunately, that in me a little bit, that the people can be a bit scary, so you need to be careful. So, and I think that's sort of what a lot of why I frankly don't have any huge talents that I got famous for, but if I've never been interested in fame or the limelight because I think I'm just kind of a little afraid of how people are because I grew up in it. It's just very different from my parents who had these normal upbringings and became famous. They didn't grow up inside this thing that is fame. So yeah.
Yeah, it is a good perspective that how, yeah, like you say, you grew up with it, so you've seen the bad and but you'll see the good side, but also the bad side where as your mum and
Oh
dad have
yeah.
just been like pushed straight into the deep end, really, haven't they?
Yeah, and I think you realize that people are just people, I'm very not easily starstruck. I have people I admire and bands and actors and actresses and this that, but I do realize that they're just people, because I've sort of because my like I said, my stepdad was a musician in the Small Faces and the Faces, and then he was on tour with the Stones. So I've been around a lot of that growing up, and and everybody's really lovely, but they are just human beings who do this job that makes them seem larger than life. And they are larger than life when they're up on the screen and up on the stage. I completely see that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a normal human instinct to be starstruck in it, but like you say, they're just human beings really that just have a talent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And but obviously they've taken all the hopefully the right roads to get famous. I mean, there's a lot of talented people all over the place, but these some particular people have that spark, and I think people have said that about the Who. Roger even said that there was some kind of magic, that is almost like a marriage that is so it just works, and you can't explain why, but it's just that obviously the members passed on, but when it was right, it was so right. And I'm reading Tony Fletcher's book again, and it's really interesting. He goes into so much background that I never knew, to be honest, and it's so interesting.
What is that like reading things about your dad, like you mentioned there, the book? What is that like for you?
It's strange, and I have to almost remind myself that this is my father that I'm reading about, and then some of the stories that I thought were true that aren't true, like the swimming pool one and the car, and yeah, and there's actually a story that I've been telling for years about the Waldorf Astoria that I thought was true. It was similar, but I'd been telling it wrong all this time, so I'm glad I reread his book. So about cherry bombs, and it was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I didn't tell the whole story, but apparently I thought that he had blown all the doors off the floor, off the rooms on the floor that he was on, but apparently it wasn't. He'd blown like a door. I blew a door off somewhere to get to his luggage because they wouldn't let him get to it. So the Waldorf Astoria did ban him. Because when I accepted the award at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I said, I understand my father was banned from this hotel, so he wouldn't have been able to accept this award anyway. But I was too nervous to say any more than that. But I'm glad that, the story that I'd been telling all these years was wrong. And I used to think that he taught Zach to play drums, and then Zach said, Keith didn't teach me to play drums. And I'm like, oh, excuse me, I've been perpetuating that myth as well. But it's amazing how over the years, what started as a nugget of something became, like, yes, it absolutely did go like this. I'm like, no, some of them didn't, because I really thought there was a car in the swimming pool at some point. But I guess not. So anyway,
what was the story behind that? Did he reverse it into a pool, or something happened in it at a party?
and in his 21st birthday party at the holiday, yeah, that he had like knocked his front tooth out, and then apparently in a blackout somehow but apparently that the whole car in the swimming pool part didn't happen. That's according to Tony Fletcher's book. I'm sure now there'll be people out there that say, wait a minute, I saw it. I was curious. There must have been like a cleanup bill or towing. Somebody must remember towing a car out of his. Anyway, it's just that's one of the big things that strikes me is that how many of these stories became that was so associated with him that may not even have really happened, and then he probably started it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Yeah, I'm still reading it, to be honest. It's a big book, but I'm enjoying it, and I think he got a lot of things right. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it must be strange reading about, but then, like you said, there's that many myths and truths that you don't know what to believe, really, do you?
I know, and I think as long as his book is correct,
Yeah, yeah.
he's telling some of them, but yeah, and then there's also Dougal's book, that's more like sort of like in the moment, that are rah rah all the stories kind of book, whereas this one is a little more background, and so I mean I think they're all good reads, and they're all interesting. That the books that have been written about him. Well, there's just really those two that are about him specifically, and then the newer one that is more about his playing, and interviews from people who were fans, or who were fellow musicians, or and now the title of it is escaping me. I'm sorry, but there's a slightly new book too.
Well, with his drumming, like, there's all the crazy stories which add to the to his myth, and like it's brilliant to read that, because I like a like something that's got a personality in music. I'm sure you do as well with your music taste. Like, it makes it more interesting, doesn't it, when you read about these people? But his drumming as well. He was a brilliant drummer, so it kind of sometimes it overshadows that, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, and I think that's the nice thing. I'm looking at my bookcase now. I wish I could remember, but the most recent book, that it really does, it emphasizes his drumming, and how that how that affected other musicians. Like recently, Clem Burke passed away, and I wish that I had met him because he's such a huge fan of Keith, and I wish that I wish that he had met. I don't know if he ever did meet Keith. Clem Burke would have been very young, but yeah, I'm just hearing, how and maybe he would or wouldn't have cared about all these Keith's antics, but it was his playing that really influenced him, and the some of Keith's idols as well. Is it Louis Bellson, the very flamboyant? I'm not sure if I'm thinking of the right drummer, but yeah, I think it's good to hear who Keith was influenced by, because I think some people think that it was just like, a burst of ADHD or something, but which he never really was diagnosed with. But there's probably a strong possibility there could have been something like that going on. But he did, he did have heroes, and he did have Eugene Krupa as well, heroes, as far as his drumming went, and that he was a hero to other drummers that like John Bonham, they were good friends, and they really admired each other too. Different kinds of drummers, but really loved watching each other drum, and all the antics aside, I think it's nice that drummers appreciated him for his drumming, because there's a lot of people that just said, I was just wild and he couldn't keep time, blah blah blah. Well, apparently when you listen to it, he could.
Yeah.
Not always, maybe not too many animal tranquilizers, but generally he was, kind of a one-off sort of person. I think it seemed like in many ways, and that elevated personality probably added to everything that was going on. But it was hard on people around him and him
Yeah.
personally to keep that up. I think once you start that, he felt he needed to live up to it. Is what I've read and what I've heard from my mum too, that there was that pressure to be on and entertaining, and but he'd built that himself, but I imagine it was hard to sustain.
You mentioned he wasn't at home much, but when he was at home, what was he like?
I don't remember him being at home all that much, unfortunately, because when I was little, he was usually on tour, or my mum was trying to keep me away from him, I think, at that time. But I do remember him when I wasn't afraid, him being happy, being lovely to my mum, my grandmother, my mum's mum lived with us too, and I remember them getting along really well. We had a bar. There was a bar in the house at Tara that had superheroes painted all around, because he loved like Silver Surfer and those old Marvel comics. So they were all painted there, Captain America, and I remember that bar room being a lot of fun, and just being pretty little, but playing around also with my uncle Dermot, who's only 8 months older than me. That's why it's kind of why my mum's mum was living with us too for a little while, and so they kind of lived with us. So it was kind of a fun environment, because the grown-ups were young grown-ups and not really behaving like grown-ups most of the time. So, being in the kitchen cooking, and I not him cooking, but my mom and Dougal, our chauffeur who lived with us. But yeah, I have good memories of Tara, not always with him around all the time, but I remember him being nice and happy most of the time. But like I said, there was the unfortunate, and I didn't know that it was a drinking switch, but that was confusing as a child, how he could be really nice and happy for a while. But then, I'm sober. And so, my, not to the extreme that I saw things, but my kids have definitely had some experiences where mom was one way 1 minute and another way the other. So, I used to be angry with him when I was a teenager because of the way he treated my mom, and I didn't want to talk about him or talk about any of that. But since I've been older and had my troubles with alcohol, I'm a lot more sympathetic, and I realize, and empathetic now. And we don't always mean to be mean. We don't always mean to be that way, and we often don't remember those things that happened. And so I think, I have a lot more compassion, and I realized he didn't mean to be, mean when he was, and that's not the main memory I have of him anymore.
Well, you mentioned before as well, like if it was this is the 60s and 70s, but maybe if it were nowadays, he would be diagnosed with something like ADHD. Maybe did have these problems that nobody knew about.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. Yeah, and there's still a strange amount of shame around alcoholism. I think it's just all like we should all be able to control ourselves all the time, kind of thing. But and my son has ADHD, so I mean, somewhere is in the, whether it was in the family, diagnosed or undiagnosed, it is in the family. He was diagnosed in first grade, and like you said, I don't think. I don't think Keith would have been diagnosed. I don't think we would have even, I mean, it didn't really, maybe existed in very extreme cases back then, but like you said, it wasn't a household word. I'm 59. When I was growing up, you were just like hyper, kids were just hyper, and then boys were just that way, you just kind of, but my grandmother, who I refer to as Nanny, she did say, when she took him places as a baby, because she had been a radiology assistant in a hospital, and she took him to the hospital to show him off, and she said he just cried the whole time. She said when other people brought their babies to show off, they'd been all, oh, sweet, but then he was like, ah, and every time she took him anywhere, she said it was just very different experience, because she had two more children after him. I mean, they're two girls. He has two sisters, Linda then Leslie, and she said they were totally, and so she kind of thought it was just the boy versus girl experience, but I think she had a rather extreme boy. She said, but it was just such a different experience. But I agree with you that, I think people seek help sooner now. I think a lot of the stigma hopefully is gone from, things to do with mental illness and addiction. And also it's more available. It's more talked about. So it's like, oh, well, if someone is a little more than a little, extra, then maybe we'll, nowadays a teacher would recommend it, excuse me, which is the road that we went. Our teacher recommended for our son, and it's helpful to know what's going on. But yeah, I think you're very right in that.
And as well, there's the story where he accidentally ran over his bodyguard and his friend, and apparently, like that was the start of his downfall as well. So maybe that, like, now it'd be different with help he could have gotten stuff.
Yeah. I think my mum could have used help after that too. So they
Really?
both, it was, a traumatic event for both of them. I didn't really know about it for a long time, before the internet. If your parents don't tell you, people around you didn't talk to me about that at all. So I really didn't really, I'd heard things. I'd always thought there'd been a car accident. I always pictured it like a car in a ditch or something. Someone was hurt or killed, but there was just from hearing people talk, I think. So when I did find out what actually happened, when I was a kid, I asked my mom, just asking her as a child if she'd ever seen a dead person. I don't know if I'd seen a movie or something on TV, and she said yes, and she told me briefly that story. I was probably in my, I guess I maybe it was after we moved here, but it's somewhere in a child, probably younger than a teenager. So I knew about it fairly young. But yeah, mom, I think, had some depression in her life, and I do think it had to do with that. It was also, she would never watch horror films. She didn't want to have to do anything with anything bloody or gory, and I really think it was just a horrible thing that everybody, and so horrible for him and obviously his family. Yeah, and there's been all kinds of talk about, whether Keith was behind the wheel or not, and I really don't know. I just don't. And there was, and whoever was, if it wasn't Keith, it was, and it just an extreme impulse situation. I don't know, but I think you're right about getting help. I think pretty much nowadays it would be almost automatic that you'd be offered some kind of counseling after something like that, and his family too, Neil Boland's family as well. But yeah, it was horrible. It was. No, and it's strange to read, something like that. That people that your parents are attached to something as terrible as that, and as devastating to another family.
Well, you mentioned your mother there. I'm sure she was a very important person in your life. What was she like at home when Keith was on the road and like she was looking after you by herself?
What was my mom like?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my mom was lovely. Always very. She was strict, but not mean, and I think it was more about safety than anything. Given our situation was a little strange, and strangers, and she was always used to be worried that I'd be kidnapped or something when I was little, but nothing like that ever happened. But she was lovely, a very creative mom. She and I used to kind of lament having a younger mother. I just like, I want an older mom like my friends, not my mom is all glamorous and their mums were sort of all very normal, and I kind of wanted that. But I realize now that, I mean, she was just so much fun, just to go out. She just loved, she loves cooking. She was a very good cook, and she really enjoyed um, herbs and growing things, and when before she died, she lived in Austin, Texas, and grew all sorts of things in her garden there, and when we lived in England, she did grow flowers and herbs and things, and but just a really sweet, and it was more like having a friend. She was 17 when she had me, and I was 40 when she died, and she was 57 when she passed away. But it was almost, more like having a friend or a sister, I suppose. Although she, like I mentioned, she was a strict parent to some degree, so there was always that she is my mom, the line there. But we were friends, and she was lovely. She was very protective back then, when I was little, and we were still with Keith, and then after we left, we lived, the two of us, in a little house before we moved in with Mac, a little house in Twickenham for a little while. And she was just, very, very protective and very loving. She was a good mom, I mean, she got pregnant with me at 16, so I know she didn't really plan on being a mom, but it was, she made the best of it. But,
Yeah,
I loved her. I still love her, of course.
yeah, yeah. Sorry to hear about her loss. You lost with your mum as well.
Oh. Yeah, she was on the cell phone. She didn't stop at a stop sign.
Oh, really?
So yeah, don't talk on the cell phone while you're driving. Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned there, like, both your parents were young when they had you. Like, your mum, you mentioned they were 17, Keith was 19. So, especially with
Yeah.
Keith, he was obviously in one of the biggest bands in the world at that point, when you were born. Do you think it was really hard for him to switch off, like, these two different lives?
Yeah, I think it was practically impossible for him. Really, I think it's hard for most stars. I think now it seems like people handle fame a lot better now. But I think it was all brand new then. This and it's also, I've also thought, the whole groupie situation was very hard for my mom when he was out on tour, and it's sort of so biologically unusual for men to be chased that way. Like, you don't have accountants, work with women outside screaming, and no, there's female accountants I know too, but it's like, I think women are so more used to being pursued, not that much, but I think it's so unusual for men to be pursued in that way, and unnatural, really. They don't really know how to handle it, and being on tour and then coming home to a normal life. I think it's surprising how many of those young rock stars were married and had children when they were as young as they were. The Stones too,
Yeah.
and the Who. They all kind of got. They didn't all last. Not saying that the marriages lasted, but they all got married really young. I guess it's just still left over from the 50s, maybe, kind of just what you did, especially when the women were getting pregnant. But it still surprises me, how many of them were married. Yeah. However, he mentally got himself ready for shows, and kind of been all drinking. There must have, been some preparation when you're playing in front of that many people. I just can't imagine what that takes, and the how, not necessarily an anticlimax, but just the coming down from that, the just going back to a normal life. And especially with somebody who may have had, probably did have that kind of attention deficit things going on, that it's just so hard to jump back into the normalcy of just being a dad and a husband, and just, just living a normal life. And there wasn't really a normal life. They were up all hours. I mean, I was told to stay in my room quite a lot. So it wasn't really like everyone went to bed and got up in the morning, like in normal houses. Like when I'd stay with my grandmother, his mom, nanny, I loved staying with her because of the normalcy. It was strange to me that she went to bed and like slept through and then got up before me. Because I was used to them being up before me, but they usually hadn't gone to bed yet. I was used to them being up when I went to school because they'd been up all night. That was normal, like getting my bike and saying good night. I mean, well, kind of good night and goodbye, but they hadn't gone to bed yet. But it was Nanny had just got up before me making tea, and that was just, I'd hear her in the kitchen, getting up, and that was just the strangest thing. But it was such a normal thing. Maybe when he was gone, there was more of that normalcy because my mom didn't really carry on like that when he was gone. She did keep more normal hours. But yeah, I don't really think there was any normalcy. It was just sort of always going when he was there.
Do you like? Would there be a lot of parties then at the house?
Yeah, the parties are just people there. Um, and I can't specifically remember, a lot of the people I know. He was friends with Ringo, and Ringo used to. My uncle Dermot and I used to have a little band that we called the Lobsters, and Ringo once asked Keith about it. Oh no, actually he asked my mom. I think the Lobsters still together because there was a pub at the end of the driveway called the Garden Grove, and we'd guest play on the lawn there. And so, but I do remember Ringo and I do remember we had a barn owl that was given to us by Harry Nielsen, a barn owl out that we kept out. It was kept in an enclosure well, maybe it could come and go. And now I think about it, because there really was no reason to enclose it. But I don't know. It's a strange gift. But he was good friends with Harry Nielsen, and so I mean, there were always people coming and going. But when you're very little, it's hard to remember who all those people are.
You mentioned it must have been crazy with the drink, the drugs. Like your father was known as Moon the Loon.
Yeah.
So with all his antics and stuff, you mentioned it before, which was quite interesting. Do you feel he had to keep up that character even when he didn't want to? Because that must be exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it must be exhausting. Mum never really talked about that as much, but maybe it's because we did leave when he was still relatively young. Maybe it was, he was still kind of in it a little bit, because I probably should know what year we left, but it would probably be around 74, I suppose, something like that. But one thing that when you mentioned that, it made me think of actually his last night alive, which I wasn't there for, obviously, but it was something that was kind of mentioned in books and things like that, that there was this party, the Peppermint Park, that Paul McCartney was throwing for the movie, and he hadn't really wanted to go because he had recently stopped drinking, and he'd been taking the Heminevrin to try and curb the cravings. I guess that's what it did, that particular drug, or made you not want to drink. So I think that was apparently Annette had really wanted to go, and that's fine. I'm sure, I would have probably really wanted to go too if I was her. But apparently he didn't really. And I think from what I've heard, it had a lot to do with that, with not feeling that he could be that he could be the Keith Moon that he was expecting, because he wasn't drinking. So unfortunately, he decided to do some drugs instead. And then I think that led to him drinking as well, and then taking a lot of the Heminevrin, like at least 23 pills or something like that were found undigested. So he did used to take handfuls of things. But I mean, so, I was always told it was an accidental overdose. But to answer your question, I think that, especially in later years, and I think almost when you look at pictures, you can kind of see it in his face, even though he'd just turned 32 2 weeks before he died, because I used to think he was 31 when he died. And then I was tired, and then something said 32. I was like, wait, why is this? It's because he just turned 32 2 weeks, I think, to the day after that he died. So that's why it was just so close. But I mean, he looked like he was in his 40s. He was all puffy from drinking, and I think he just looked kind of sad, and it looked so. I think probably during those years, maybe it was sort of hard to muster it and put it on again. I mean, you can see it here and there in pictures, like in Malibu and sort of, cavorting, but once again, those are kind of photo ops, and seemed to love those. So I think he was to look fairly happy in them.
It was, yeah. I mean, now you mentioned he did look a lot. It looked like not to Elvis's extreme, but how Elvis looked before he died. Like,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I can see the similarity. And apparently, Roger had mentioned to me a long time ago when we first started talking about this movie that he's talking about making, that Keith had a bit of an obsession with Elvis before he passed away. No, I mean, maybe, I don't know if he kind of saw something in himself that that had happened to him. Not, I don't know about physically, but I don't know. And he was a little bit of obsessed about how his fame seemed to explode after he passed away. But like I said too, this was, fame. By then, people have been being famous for a long time, but the kind of fame that they were experiencing, there wasn't really a roadmap, or and what do you do when this happens, or and so I think, or maybe he was relating to him to some degree, somebody that had been such a showman, and and kind of let himself go quite a bit towards the end. But yeah, I can see that resemblance, and physically, but also as far as the personality too, having to keep that up and up and up. Yeah, I wonder what he would have been like if he'd lived longer.
do you think you would have been back in touch and things?
I don't know, so if it managed to stay sober and had, sobriety, it's amazing how it changes the way you think about things. Or maybe it's the drinking that changes the way you think about things, then it goes to where it should be when you stop. And you kind of naturally want to make those amends, whether you're in a 12-step program or not. There's a lot of different ways to get sober, but it's just sort of a natural part of it. I think you just want to kind of go, oh God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. So, I mean, I don't know on that level, possibly, or, yeah, I mean, I like to think that, like people do after some time, I definitely know I had forgiveness after having my own troubles with alcohol and realizing that it wasn't that easy to just stop, or that the way I got when I drank wasn't the way I usually am, and it took me a lot of years to figure out that. I mean, it was pretty self-evident, but like why it was happening, or trying different ways to stop it from happening, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'd like to think we could have.
Yeah, it would have been nice, but like you mentioned, you and your mum had left him a few years earlier. Was there like a turning point where your mum thought, like, we have to get out of here, kind of thing?
Yeah, unfortunate fights, drunken fights. Yeah, him just exploding, throwing things around. There was one night, I have a scar on my leg that he didn't hit me, but he turned off the lights and just threw everything around in the living room in Tara, and I guess a vase broke, and I got this little scar from a chip. But yeah, and things like just fighting with my mom when it just got violent, and my mom we couldn't take it. So Dougal would often take us, or a taxi, and would usually go, excuse me, I'm not crying, to actually, during those times, we would usually go to my mum's parents. So either, because my mum's mum ended up leaving my mum's dad, and he stayed in Dorset. So the mum's mum did, her name was Jo, and she was living with us for a while. But when those kind of fights happened, we would sort of all rally together and go back to Dorset to my mum's dad, in the country. Yeah, and my mum didn't drive, so that's why back then she drove later in life. But yeah, so it's unfortunate. I mean, I think in any families with domestic violence, you can understand. I mean, anyone can understand that probably the safest thing is to get away, because there's no talking to somebody when they're like that. So I think she did what she felt was the safest. And it's scary to be bundled up in the middle of the night, but it's usually not surprising because you've been hearing what's going on. So it's kind of a relief to just get out, and then things always calm down, and he apologized, and then we go back. And yeah, but I think, just being so young, it's hard to remember the details of that time just because of the age.
Mm. What happened then? Did he, like you mentioned, he'd apologise and then he'd go back? Did your mum just say that's it, no more now then?
I think probably the fight that I mentioned when he turned all the lights off, that one may have been the last straw. I can't remember exactly when, but I do know that it was bad enough that we had to hide for a while. We stayed at this hotel called Great Foster's. It's still there. I don't remember where the area. It might be in Dorset as well. But I guess Henry VIII. There used to be a castle at one time, and so it had a very Henry VIII had lived there, or his wives did, or and so that was very much a theme, and it was supposed to be haunted. But we lived there probably for about a month or so, and we did a kind of a lot of living at hotels when I was little. Maybe because of the getting away in the middle of the night. If we didn't go to a relative's house, we went to a hotel instead. But that was the last time when we lived in a hotel for a while, and then we ended up not going back and going to the little house in Twickenham. But apparently he was always trying to get Mum to go back. And I can relate to to him in those times, because I know when I was drinking and blacking out and doing and saying things I didn't mean and I really didn't mean and didn't understand why I was behaving that way, and he was having that same experience, and not knowing why and so I think my mom, she would definitely say there were many sides to him. And I don't know about if I have many, but I definitely have those two. I have the drunk, crazy, don't remember anything, don't act like myself, and then then the normal anxious, talk too much me. But yeah, so I think it was just that she loved him, and she wanted that person that she fell in love with back, and she wanted that person who was the way he was when he apologized and really meant it, because he really didn't mean to do those things, or say those things, or whatever they were, and she believed those apologies, I think, until you just can't anymore, and it's for your own safety. I think he broke her nose a couple times, and my safety too, and that's why I think that, like, the fight that I just mentioned with the lights off and things thrown around might have been that the very last time. I think after that she thought that was too much, because I didn't get hurt badly. It's just a little scrape, but I think the fact that
Could have
something
been
like
worse,
that.
couldn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, like you mentioned, things being different back then. Nowadays, if things had been happening the way they were, maybe child services would have been involved, and she would have been forced. I mean, it's so different now that we can recognize, and it's good. You don't want domestic violence to be hid under the covers. I mean, because there's that same sort of guilt and shame that goes along with addiction and mental illness, and I think the more people will get help, the more it's not stigmatized to get help, and that it's we understand why. Well, I've been married 3 times. My first husband, there was some abuse. This marriage, I've been married for 31 years. We've been married a long time, but as a result of drinking and drugs, and and so I know what it feels like to believe those apologies and think things will be different, and then they aren't one, and so you just make that decision. But yeah, and she was strong for doing that, because she was very young as well when she did, only about 20, 25 or so, I think. I should know these things by heart, but I don't.
Do you think you take a lot of your mum's personalities then? Like you've got a lot in common with your mum, more than your dad?
Oh, I don't know. I'd like to think so. No, I think I'm more anxious than her. I think she's a lot cooler than I. No, I don't know. We were very similar. We were very much alike. we enjoyed each other. She had a great sense of humor, very silly. I very much grew up with Monty Python. I don't know if you see the rabbit behind me. That was a gift from my daughter, the Monty Python rabbit.
Oh
You
yeah,
might not see it back there, but yeah, I grew up with very much like a Monty Python, Fawlty Towers household.
yeah.
Mac, stepdad, loved comedy, and he was big Marx Brothers fan. He loved old stuff and new stuff, and so yeah, I'd like to think so. I don't know. I've always, she was much cooler and beautiful, but I'd like to think I took some things from her. I love
So
being a mom, and I
yeah,
think she loved as much as could be expected for her age. I was a lot older. I was 31 when I became a mom, so that's a big difference,
yeah.
and approach motherhood too. And
Well,
it was on purpose.
they were still kids, really, weren't they, when they had you? So it's not.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I think when you're little and younger, even a teenager, you don't take that into consideration. They're just your parents, and they're just annoying, and they drink too much or whatever. But when you get older, and I definitely have. I hope most people do. I hope my kids do one day. But I think you have a lot more respect for what they what went through.
Yeah,
And who they were as people. I think you takes that bit of distance to see them as people, and you have to do that bit of growing up yourself. It can't really be expected of a teenager or even probably anyone in their 20s to really, not that we all have to appreciate what our parents went through, but I don't think we can even begin to do that until we're that bit older and have a bit more experience under our belts as well too. But no, and then I I'm glad that I came from where I came from. I feel very lucky. I do. I mean, I don't, I mean, I don't feel lucky to sort of have had a drinking problem, but that could have happened out of any family. I don't blame that on any. It's just, those things are what they are. But I've always felt very lucky, and you know, I've probably lived a pretty quiet life compared to maybe other kids of famous people. I see them at fashion shows and things, and I don't do that kind of thing. I did accept the award at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like I mentioned, and the Grammy. I was very pregnant when so I think all I said was, obviously I didn't inherit Keith's talent, so hopefully it'll skip a generation, and patted my it's always short. They don't want to see me anyway. They want to see the band members. But yeah, I do. I feel very lucky, and I love who my mum was, and I loved my stepdad, and I love Keith as much as I knew him.
yeah,
And I, like I said, I appreciate doing things like this and reading the books, and it makes me sort of appreciate who he was when I see that it still carries on. People still listen to the music. People still care about him, and how he was, and family members like myself, and like I said, he's got two sisters. One lives in Australia, one lives in England, and she's got three children, and his sister in Australia has one daughter. So we're all out and about there.
so do you know, like, you're his only child? Say, like,
No. Sorry. Let's come forward. I'm sorry.
So, say somebody wants to do a biopic of him, for example, would they have to go through you to do stuff like that?
Um, yeah, yes, but there's no reason that I wouldn't give permission. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so, but yeah, and because we've trademarked his likeness and his name.
Yeah,
So then that's separate from the Who. So that means that we can produce T-shirts, which we have with the signature. We have some drumsticks. We don't really. For a while, we kind of had a website, but I've always felt strange about doing that kind of thing, to be honest, about selling merchandise. And then the way it was explained to me was, well, if you don't do it, somebody else will.
yeah, yeah,
So and when you look out there are actually a lot of people using his likeness, and not like Taylor Swift or anything, obviously, but a certain amount of Keith, specifically Keith T-shirts or merchandise. And so we will. So my husband usually goes out, looks at them, and will. They usually don't like to do cease and desist, but we just let them know that we're out there, and mostly they're not making enough money that I want to go after anybody. There's no reason to. But as far as a biopic, yeah, Roger had talked to me about the movie that's possibly going to be made, the film. So that there was more going on a couple of years ago, and now they've been on tour. They had the farewell tour. We got to see them at the Hollywood Bowl, which was lovely. So I imagine he's pretty busy. So I'm not sure, but some things have been going on with the biopic of Keith. So maybe it will be out. I mean, maybe it hasn't been made yet, but maybe it'll be made sometime in the near future. He approved the script, which took a really long time to find a script writer that he liked and a script that he liked. But he has now, so we'll see.
But that's the thing, look, it's obviously still your father. Like, you don't, if somebody's going to do something based on his life, you want it to be factual, don't you? And not anybody doing it, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that's why I think it's so great that Roger is the one that has wanted to do it, Roger Daltrey. And he's been talking about it for about 35 years. I'm not exaggerating, I'm really not. He has been talking about it for that long. I mean, there's never been any pressure for me. And when I've seen him over the years, he was say, I'm sorry, that's coming. I've said, it's okay. It's no, whether you do it or not, it's completely his thing. And he did send me the script, which I approved. I thought it was a really good script, and thought it was a very interesting. But I mean, interesting even if you weren't a Who fan. It's just like a good story and well written. And, yeah, so hopefully something will come of it. We'll see.
Yeah, definitely. So on Keith, can you remember the last time you saw him?
Yeah, I do actually. We were living with my stepdad, Mac. My mum and him weren't married yet, but he lived in East Sheen, just outside of London. And the kitchen door had kind of a frosted glass window on part of it. And Keith came over one day, and I guess he was even, I don't know, I suppose he might have been with Annette at that time. I'm really not sure, but he was trying to get Mama Mac, trying to get my mum to go back with him over the years with calling and writing letters and things like that. And he came over one day, and I remember going to the door, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, but I did recognize him just from being at the door. And he really just wanted to come over and take Mom out for a drink, and wanted Mac to babysit, which Mac didn't want to do. So that didn't happen. But I just remember him as I was opening the door, on the other side of the door, saying, "Hello, Mandy," and I recognized his voice and the way that he said it. And he was really nice and really friendly that day. I didn't really feel afraid of him or anything. I hadn't seen him, I don't think, since we left. If I had, I don't remember. But yeah, it was kind of quick, because then my mum sent me off. It was sort of a big house, so I think they had their conversation, but she didn't end up going out for a drink with him and Mac babysitting. But I do remember that last time, and I suppose that would have been a year or so before he died. But so yeah, so we didn't really have a conversation, to be honest. He just said hello. But I just remember him there at the door, and knowing it was him, even though it was still fuzzy and I couldn't actually see him. Just something about the silhouette of him, and I don't know, maybe the energy. I don't know, but just knew it was.
Was it your mum that told you the sad news then of what had happened?
Mum told me on the phone, actually. I'd gone on holiday with my friend Caroline and her family to Bognor Regis, and so we were just in the house that we were staying in. I don't know if it was a relative's house, but we were just there on holiday, and he had passed away, and Mum called the house because she said, "It's going to be on the news, and I want you to know." So she told my friend's parents, and then talked to me for a while, because she didn't want me to learn it from the news. And then she did send the car to get me early. I don't know, because she was worried. Actually, she was worried about reporters. Because when I was little, I didn't like reporters, because they were around all the time. I mean, not all the time, but at the very end of the gates of Tara, you couldn't come up any further. But it wasn't not like it is now when you see people going out of places and it's just flashes and flashes. But it would be sort of a little bit in the bushes and jumping out at you, or on a bicycle or riding by, and that was always kind of scary, and my mom really didn't like that at all. So and then on airports, I don't know what it is with airports, it seemed to be where they used to love to take pictures of people when you were coming out of an airport. But so she was just worried about the press, so she had me come home. But I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. She said it was going to be a circus, so I didn't go. I see pictures of Nanny, my grandmother, from there, so it's very sad. But yeah, and my mom was devastated. Actually, it took her a long time to get over that. And I think like I mentioned earlier, between the car accident where Neil Boland died and Keith dying, and my mom sort of always felt she was a little bit psychic and had premonitions and things like that. I don't. Although since she's died, I feel like I want to go to a medium. But she felt like she had a premonition that something was going to happen to him the day before. Sorry if we have a bad connection. We got bad weather here.
Oh, no, it's okay.
So I was, but yeah, it was. It was a sad time though. And then we moved here, I think within the year, to that beach house that I mentioned. Things weren't as good financially for Mac after the faces, so we moved from Ishin to Wandsworth. The house in Wandsworth was nice. It was an old doctor's office that had a bomb shelter underneath. But we moved from there to America.
What was that move like for you?
It was strange. I'd been to America once before when we first started living with Mac. He was on tour with the Rolling Stones, the Some Girls tour, because he had played on the album Some Girls. He played on Some Girls and Tattoo You after that, those two, and he toured with those albums. But he was not faithful to my mum, so we joined him on tour a lot so that mum could be there because she didn't want to go through that again, although unfortunately she did go through that again with groupies. But so that's why we came here to California. Went to Los Angeles and then Hawaii in 1975 with the Rolling Stones. No place for a child.
Was that crazy?
I remember George was playing across the street. We were staying at the Century Plaza Hotel. But so I remembered America, and I remembered everything being really big. Even though, I mean, I was little when we came, but I was 9 when we came here on holiday, and I guess 11 or 12 when we moved here. 12 when we moved here. But yeah, I actually liked it. I mean, how can you not like moving to Malibu?
Yeah.
It was literally on the beach, so it was a lovely house. And we did live there for about a year, and then another house in Malibu, because even though it was his house, it wasn't paid for, and so my mom and I couldn't pay the mortgage for that house. But yeah, so we sold that. But I mean, I've always really liked America. I love England too, but I think because of maybe moving here at 12, going to school here, a lot of, I suppose half and half school, but I'm just became sort of Americanized, I suppose. People have asked me why I don't move back to England, and I think I was, like I said, growing up here, going through those formative teenage years and 20s here, and I think I just sort of developed a sense of self here more than I have in England. I love visiting England, and my parents Mum and Mac would always talk about moving back there, but they never did. They ended up moving to Texas, so we moved to California. We've kind of moved around LA, a lot of different areas, and then the Northridge earthquake scared my mom. She hated earthquakes, didn't mind tornadoes apparently, because they have those in Texas, but the earth, that I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back as well. So they ended up moving to Austin, which is a very musical town. And so my stepdad Mac he thrived there. He loved Austin, and he did a lot of session work towards the end. He had a stroke almost 10 years ago now. But yeah, but yeah, I like it here, but I want to come back to England soon.
Yeah, it's well, it's freezing here now, but it's not as bad as the weather there though.
Yeah, we're just having this one weird storm coming through. Apparently, it's supposed to. I mean, we could just use more rain in general. It's October, so it would be nice if it did rain regularly. But we're having it. It even said there might be some tornadoes in town, which is not normal for Los Angeles. But that's very doubtful. I don't think that's probably going to happen. But it's just the way of the world these days. Just these extreme storms in places that don't usually get this kind of weather. But we're just sort of getting 6 months worth in one night and day. It could be like eight inches or so, which is a lot in one day.
Yeah,
But then tomorrow it's supposed to be sunny. So I don't know. It's global warming for you, I guess.
yeah, crazy. Well, you're still living in America, like you say. You mentioned you had your alcohol problems, but now you're sober, which is great to hear. How's all that going?
Oh, good. Thank you. I celebrated 10 years sober last month. Actually, September 12th is my sobriety date. But I've been in the program for 20 years. So I actually started trying to get sober in 2005. But I had some relapses in the first 10 years. I was mostly sober, but a few times went back to it, talked myself back into it again, thought I could do it differently, but not the case for someone like me. So yeah. And my husband is sober over 20 years. So I mean, it's so helpful that we both don't drink. So I don't think we could have stayed together if one of us did. And he very nicely stayed with me through my relapses, but only just. So luckily we still made it for 31 years. And I'm a grandmother now. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter, as you know, because I was babysitting yesterday. But and that's wonderful too. She's got good rhythm. That does seem to run in the family. I'm not a drummer. I have played drums and I played percussion for a while, but we seem to have fairly good rhythm. So.
But I was going to ask you, what is life like these days? Like, say you've got the grandkids and your own children and stuff. So, is it just a family life now, really?
Yes, yeah, it really is. I was most recently working with horses, like you mentioned, doing equine therapy. I've also worked in recovery a little bit, drug and alcohol counselor and that kind of thing. So I seem to be more drawn to that kind of maybe more service work. But have kind of a quiet life. We went through that fire earlier in the year in our neighborhood. So it's kind of, we didn't literally have to rebuild our house. Luckily, our house did survive. We had to have what's called remediation done, which for almost a month, having it basically, or the house cleaned inside and out, I'm sorry, I can't think of it. The insulation and all that kind of thing that can trap smoke, anything that smoke could be trapped in. So, and we had a lot of work done in our yard. So I found myself being kind of around the house, to be honest, a lot more this year than usual. But there's been some talk about writing some kind of a memoir. So I've been sort of loosely doing that a little bit, obviously I don't have a lot of memories of Keith, but also talking maybe somewhat about recovery and that kind of thing. But we'll see, because I'm not a writer. My daughter is. She's a really good writer, so I could ask her for help. But yeah, like it's sort of quiet these days, which, as I mentioned, I'm 59, so it's kind of nice. Oh, but something, I'd had a little horse store for a while that didn't do very well, but we decided to use the same location and we opened a tattoo shop. So that is something that we have going on. I don't do tattoos. I have some tattoos, but it's called Wolf Moon Tattoo, because my last name now is D Wolf. My husband's name is D Wolf, and then Moon being my maiden name. So yeah, that's something we're doing, is that I'm not there the way my husband is. He's there pretty much on a daily basis, which when we had the horsey store, I was there all the time, but now he's there all the time. So So that's kind of cool. We just have a little tattoo studio in Pasadena.
What
So
does your husband do the tattoos then, or does he do?
he's not doing them himself. He does know how to do them, but he's a graphic artist. He hasn't been a tattoo artist all his life. He's mostly done them on himself and a couple of fill-in things for me. So we hire artists, and so they rent a chair, and they rent the whole area where they do their tattoos, and then we provide whatever inks and equipment they might need. Yeah, and so it's kind of like renting at a hair salon or something like that. You rent a station.
Ah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you have 4 stations. And yeah, it's a great little shop. I'll send you the information about it
Yeah, definitely do. Yeah, I'd like to
on
check them out. And I'll,
Instagram. Yeah, Wolf Moon Tattoo. I give it a little plug. So that's
yeah,
that's one thing that's going on, because we've always tried to do, to make. I've been very lucky as far as the Who, and and inheritance and things like that, and residuals. But we've always tried to work and make our own money. We had a coffee house for a while, but I don't know. Maybe hopefully we're getting better at our business. Because our businesses have not worked for one reason or the other, but we're having good faith in Wolf Moon Tattoos. So,
yeah, definitely. I'll leave a link to it and things, and it would be great to hear your memoir as well if you ever do.
oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I want to call it everything I know I learned from Monty Python, but I don't think I can call it that. But it's true. But yeah, no, I know it'll probably be called Moon Girl or something like that. But
Yeah, yeah, it would be a good read though, because
thank you,
it is an interesting life you have had, hasn't it? Like with
thank you.
with Keith and your mum, and then with Ian, and then your sobriety and things like that.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear. It's encouraging. Thank you. I'll
Yeah,
get the courage up one of these days.
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and thank you so much for this interview. It's been really open and honest, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It's been really nice to talk to you, and it's really good to meet you. I enjoy your podcast. I've been looking back at ones prior, just getting ready for this, and getting myself familiar. It's very nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I really appreciate you saying that, the kind words, and like I say, it was an honor to speak to you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to talk to you.
You too. Thank you, Mandy.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Take care.